Third quarter campaign finance numbers for the 2018 gubernatorial race were released this week. Mike Johnston leads among Democratic candidates with $725,000, while Republican Victor Mitchell has $2 million in cash on hand. Total fundraising numbers have already reached close to $10 million for all candidates. Roger, we just got done talking about election 2017, right, which means it's time to talk about election 2018.
Hard to imagine, right?
Exactly. Yeah. With Michael Johnston holding that kind of I'm not sure if I call it an edge. When you're up against Jared Polis, you can't really have a money edge.
Right.
But does it show that he's still a force to be reckoned with if, with all these people still joining the race, he's still able to raise decent numbers?
Yeah, because I think the numbers that even you just said, Victor, all the money that you just talked about from Victor is his own money. Right. He's putting that in, and Jared's the same way. He's putting that in. Mike has actually raised this himself. He's gone out and made the calls. Somebody else who's doing very well is Donna Lynn. More so than I thought. She has, she's moving forward as a business type candidate versus a healthcare type candidate, trying to push out in front of John's shadow. She's doing really well. I expect her in the next quarter to do even better. The really surprise for especially Republicans is George Brockler, somebody who has as much of a footprint as he has, who's been as popular as he's been. He raised less than $100,000. He has no money on hand, no cash money on hand. Why he can't inspire a base to come out and support, nobody can really figure it out. Nobody on the Republican side is doing anything like what you're seeing currently for Johnson. Good example there with Mike. The only one's doing that, and he's doing it kind of an interesting way, and that's Stapleton. And all that big money is going into a PAC. And so he's kind of sucked all the air out of the room with that. So it's all this kind of dark money that we're not seeing that's not going to be able to be spent by him, but by PACs and outside of him. I think it's going to be really interesting when we see all the spending. We could see a $20 million race here in Colorado. Easy.
Eric, what do you think from what we can gauge right now? I get it that we are literally over a year away from the election, but with the Democrats, at least right now, looking at a bruising primary, it seems that they're going to need more money because it's going to be tough. What do you see from the tea leaves, from the financial tea leaves we're seeing so far?
We spend all our time at this point a year out on those financial tea leaves because it's the only thing we can measure at this point. There are no votes, there are no caucuses, there's nothing else to measure. Sometimes I think the story is overplayed on money. Money is the mother's milk, don't get me wrong. It's critically important, but all these numbers are paltry numbers compared to the check that Jared Polis can write, you know, in the 10 seconds it takes him to write himself a check. All of the numbers on the Democratic side strike me as sufficient to run a meaningful competitive campaign. Roger's right about Donna Lynn. Roger's right about Mike Johnston. Kerry Kennedy this week came out with an impressive list of endorsements. It was a more robust list than I expected out of her at this point in the campaign. They are all competitive candidates. I can make a plausible case for really any of them winning the nomination if it breaks right. But Jared Polis still has that inside track with the combination of the unlimited checkbook and the Bernie Sanders appeal. Don't forget two things, Dominic. One is both of these primaries, but particularly on the Democratic side, you're not going to be won with 50% plus one. If in 4 or 5 way primaries, somebody's going to get a ticket to the November election with 30% of the vote, plus or minus 2, 3, 4 points, if that pie gets sliced in fairly even substantial shares. Secondly, this is really continues to be a commentary about the fallacy of what we call campaign finance reform. And in the governor's race, the contribution limits are so low that you have to spend so much of your time. So all these candidates, instead of being out about around the state, meeting voters, they're spending it in a small room, dialing for dollars, because they can only take, I don't know what the limit is, $400 or $500 at a crack. And the real meaningful money in this race is going to be what Roger referred to as the dark money. And yes, Walker's doing it a little bit more public than I might recommend, but all of these campaigns are going to have their dark money affiliate, which is raising the big bucks.
Natasha, what should we take away from the financial numbers we've seen so far?
I think it's just the start. There's going to be so much money that rolls into this race, and for good reason. There's a lot at stake, both locally but nationally as well. In reference to sort of these big groups, the PAC, I did a little research this morning, and I was looking at the names. We have things like Frontier Fairness, Colorado Strong, Better Colorado Now. And I'm just wondering who names these things. They have this sort of powerful statement that you'll never remember, and I think that's part of the intention. And if anything, as I was was looking at that this morning. It was a reminder of how the media has a call to duty here to look into these groups, to help readers and viewers have a better understanding of what their purposes are, who they are supporting, how much money is going into those races, and then maybe suggest some better names.
I can tell you, I've named my own PAC. It's the Coloradans in Favor of Good Things. So I think it's very definitive. Yes, exactly. Penny, wrap it up for us. And public television, yes.
I think it's a Ouija board, actually. It just sounds like they've kind of mixed and matched, or those little refrigerator magnets. It's not just how much money is going to be raised, although it's astonishing amounts. It's how it's going to be spent, because we've certainly seen campaigns in Colorado that have blown through a lot of cash with really stupid messages. And I think we still haven't seen the message that is going to grab the 30 or 34% of the voters. We haven't seen who's going to catch fire yet. The other thing is, with that dark money, there's a lot less control over what the messages are. So you're going to have the candidates have their own message out there, good, bad, indifferent, and then you're going to have a lot of negative ads that are done by those PACs that could go in any direction. So I think we're going to see a really, really ugly campaign. Expensive and ugly.
Expensive and ugly. That does sound like election. That's a good definition of that.